just starting. Okay, now it's live. Everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Talk Through Media with Ahmad, Enani, and Ramola D. I'm Ramola D.
Hi, I'm Ahmad.
And we're here today with Dr. Katherine Horton. And we're very thrilled to be here today because we are going to be talking about an issue that I think is of great interest to everybody around the world. And Dr. Horton has some very special insights into this issue thanks to her background. Dr. Horton is a particle physicist who has been educated at Oxford and has worked at CERN. She's also worked as a systems analyst and has special expertise with legal systems. And one of the things that and we're going to talk a little bit about her background when we do go into the subject matter here. So she's studied both legal systems and complex human systems. And I'm very privileged to actually have been working with Dr. Horton for a little while now. I've been working with her on the Technocrime Fighters Forum, which you can catch live every Thursday morning, Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. On Dr. Paul Marco's channel, World Beyond Belief. And one of the things we talk there about a great deal is about the global surveillance system and about electronic targeting, about the targeting of outstanding individuals worldwide with electromagnetic weapons, sonic weapons, scalar weapons, as well as all manner of COINTELPRO and Stasi stalking, very much in the style of the old German programs and the old KGB and Soviet programs. So today, just beginning to talk about the financial system, Dr. Horton is interested in exploring how this entire global surveillance system and this whole protocol of targeting actually does have a bearing on the financial system as we understand it worldwide. So I'm just going to throw the floor open to her at this point and ask her if she wants to jump in and talk a little bit more about that.
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm very, very honored, so thank you. Thank you, Ramola. Thank you, Ahmad. And yes, I think, I think what I would like to say just before people pounce on me, that I big myself up. My expertise is not exactly in, legal matters in detail. What I did study was try to understand the legal system from a complex human system point of view. And try to think about how to make that more efficient. So I spent an awful long time listening to court cases and trying to figure out how exactly it worked, because every system is never working the way it's actually intended to work. So how does it really work? And then I spent some time also analyzing economies, also a bit white-collar crime and stuff like that, and what bearing that has. And I found that it has a huge bearing actually to the underlying structure of our system. So the legal system, also corporate systems, and so on, and entire economies. There seems to be a big black aspect to everything. There seems to be people have heard about the black budget, for example, in military matters. But I would say that there are black corporations, and there's also a form of black law. So there's a lot of secret and black and therefore criminal sort of entities we have in all of our human systems. There's also black things happening in the medical realm, and in absolutely every human system that I analyzed, there was always a black, first of all, a silent element, a black project element, and then eventually I discovered that that's actually a very criminal element as well. So that's my background. And you made a very good introduction because you talked about the financial system and how it all, how the financial system is affected by targeting. And it also works the other way around. So I would say that the entire phenomenon of targeting is also heavily influenced by financial matters to a very, very, very large degree. It's not just through the black budget itself that might be used to actually fund the targeting operations and might be used to fund the weapons and all that. But it's the entire phenomenon of targeting, I think, has to do with financial processes and financial projects at the largest scale.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very, very thrilled to actually have the opportunity to talk about that, because I think it really helps. So I think most of the people who are targeted, they probably think, oh, I've got so many problems in my life. I'm being hurt, I'm being tortured, I'm being mutilated nonstop by a group of criminals. What the hell do I care about high finance? I can understand that, but at the same time, when you understand a bit more, you get a better view for the big picture, and you might have some ideas of what you might be able to do to get out of your targeting, or in what direction would your society have to move to get out of it. Because ultimately, I strongly believe that the targeting is driven by sexual violence, to a large degree, and absolute sadism and psychopathy as well. But at the ultimate, the biggest engine is always a money spinner. At the heart of it lies always, as a driving engine, a very powerful business plan. And if you understand what exactly the business plan is, first of all, it might give you leads for an investigation. You suddenly know where to look. But also, it gives you some surprising avenues of people you can or even have to align yourself with or team up with to stop this at all scales. So I think this is why it's important. It intimately hangs in with all this. And the topic is so vast, the topic of finance, it's so hard to know where to start. But given that we're talking about targeting and these are Nazi crimes, they are Nazi death camps, actually, that people are put into, individual death camps. And the crimes are so horrific that if you want to understand what's going on, we have to look at what's actually going wrong in the realm of finance. That goes without saying, because everything that we see is certainly not going right. So when we start with, and this is how I got into the topic, by the way. So I ended up studying human systems when after the financial crisis hit, and I really couldn't understand how it came about. That was a total mystery to me. I just couldn't understand how something that devastating could have happened at such a large scale without anybody noticing. And it's very, very interesting, because there was the opening. I think it was I think there are several London, I'm not sure if it was the London School of Economics, but one of these universities in the economics department in one of these universities that was newly reopened after the financial crisis, or newly opened. And the Queen Elizabeth, visited, and she went through all the ceremony and all that, and then at the end, she had a question for the academics who were there, and she said, "How come nobody saw this ahead of time?" I can't remember her exact words, but the actual quote is something to this effect. She said, "How come no one saw this? How come no one saw it coming?" That's a very good question.
Was this at the time of the 2008 financial collapse? So what time period precisely are you referring to?
The 2008. I'm talking, sorry, because if you actually, yes, if you take it precisely, there have been many financial collapses since then that we haven't really talked about, but certainly not in the press. But the really big one, the 2008 financial crisis. Yes.
I don't want to interrupt the flow, but I just want to, Ramola, are you seeing? There's a little sabotage going on. I'm seeing like a couple second delay between her speaking and the audio, which could really throw off people watching it. Are you seeing that?
Not at my end, because I'm seeing it fairly cleanly. I think when Katherine is speaking, it seems to be fairly clean.
Okay, I'm getting a couple second delay when she talks. I just want to make sure it wasn't recorded like that.
Yeah, I think if it's a simple shift of audio, after that it's fairly easy to correct by just shifting the audio track. So
yeah, that's true.
Okay.
But we can do some editing after that and just cut out a little bit if we need to.
Definitely.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. So yes, and this was I thought a very, very good question, and everybody was baffled in the room. Typically, because it was a very deep and very provocative question as well. You're surrounded by all these economists, and they claim to understand all this. And if they're so clever, why the hell could they not see that the biggest, it was the Chernobyl of the economies? How come you didn't see it ahead of time? How come there were no early warning systems? And I thought that was a very, very good question. Now, I think the answer is that people not just saw it coming, they arranged it. So there were absolutely thousands and thousands of people who worked towards it, but they are not in the universities. And the people who are in the universities either shut up, or the clever people have already left the universities, the people who could have anticipated it. And this is a development I saw myself in the fields I worked in, that, the years I was in research and I saw the universities and big research labs from the inside, I saw how there was an attrition rate where people just left out of frustration. And it was partially to do with the pay. We were paid abysmally, absolutely appallingly. The conditions were absolutely horrific. So, you had to work very, very long hours to really keep up. And there was also a culture whereby you would work really hard. And that's nothing unusual, because people do that in law firms and people do that in banks and companies. However, there you're paid. So imagine working those hours for absolute pittance. So it is, I think, also true that in academia, the systems have been dismantled, and all the people who might have seen it were not in academia, so they didn't have the leisure time to write about it. They didn't have the platform, and therefore it didn't happen. But nevertheless, it was a big, I think a much bigger disaster than people actually understand, because to really see the devastation, you have to add up all the people who lost their home, all the people who lost their livelihood, sometimes forever, ended up on the dole, the families who broke up, the people who committed suicide because they couldn't actually make ends meet, the children that ended up sometimes in caravans or out on the street. And that was global, and no one talks about that. I haven't seen a body count for the financial crisis yet, and I think it's for very good reason, because if we actually saw one, we would be horrified. So that was my.
I was just going to say that what I've learned too is that, well, they pre-plan decades in advance, and they sort of prefigure these outcomes. Now they're using technology on us, and who knows how many out of the entire population, but to also program outcomes. And in terms of the finances, it seems like the whole debt slavery idea was in place from the beginning. They're moving toward they want a cashless society, so then they can chip people, they can control their accounts, they can turn it off whenever. So they're just moving to an even more evolved, and they need these kinds of crises to then come in and say, hey, this is more convenient, this is a better way to go. I mean, they have a lot of things, I think, in mind. I don't know if you've read about the idea of free income, to where they give kind of like welfare, but giving people, it's all about social control and in a way enslavement. So they're just going to come in and say, we'll give you this much money as long as you don't resist and you cooperate, and everybody's going to be in harmony and peace. But in reality, you're enslaved by the system, which is now cashless. So they control absolutely everything, and they can turn it on or off whenever they want.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And then also what you mentioned, the basic income, it sounds very good, but I think it's actually used as a weapon. And it was is when it will be floated, And I think, I by no means, I don't have the expertise of people who are experts in finance. So I approach this entire thing from a systems analysis point of view. And everything I say is how a physicist would analyze this. So, in large parts, it agrees with financial commentators, and maybe it might disagree. I just give my independent sort of assessment of this. And yes, it actually takes some steps going back to understand why this is so absolutely deadly, the basic income. Because at first it sounds like such a charitable thing, but it will be everything but if it ever comes.
Right.
And here in Switzerland, there was actually a vote against it. So they were trying to bring it in Switzerland because the incomes here are stupendously high, and the prices are equally high. So to give you an idea, I think at the airport you get a coffee for something like I think it's between 6 or 8 Swiss francs. Now that's so that's roughly, I mean, I have to calculate the exact exchange, but that's something like 6 or 7 euros. And in Germany, when you get a coffee for, you know, 3 euros or 3 euros 50, you just think, you know, and you get it for 4 euros, you think, bastards. But 6 or 7 euros for coffee, just think, what? You know, for that, I can get myself a coffee maker if I go into, you know, some cheap place. So, yes, these are the sort of prices. And that's also, I think, not by mistake that it's like that. But, you know, going back to the financial crisis, what unfolded in the aftermath was just absolutely, I mean, the actual financial crisis itself was something to behold, but then also what happened after that. Because, for example, in the US, one statistic that's truly shocking me is the number of people on food stamps. And the number of people now on food stamps has rocketed up after the financial crisis. And I plotted the number for one of my presentations, and you literally can see it just like suddenly just jump up, and it's this huge hump, and then it kind of tails off. But the people who are now in this hump are that's the population of Spain, pretty much here in Europe. So imagine you have Europe, or, you know, a bigger version of Europe, and then the entirety of Spain is on food stamps.
And, you know, it has to do with the destruction of domestic economies, right? With the destruction of the manufacturing base over here, the outsourcing of so much factory labor,
Absolutely.
as well as other kinds of labor across the classes, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
They always want to create dependency too. I mean, it's a model of dependency, whether it's money or it's a cashless society or it's jobs and careers. I mean, these are all models of dependency. The more dependent they can make us, the more they can control us.
Yes, so it seems. But I absolutely, I think this is the sort of thinking at first, and at second, they are now just looking towards destruction. So I think
Right.
that's the scary aspect, that now they're not even looking for control anymore because they're controlling us so perfectly. They're now looking for extermination. They really have plans that they want to reduce the world population because they think, oh, if so many of us stay alive, then there won't be enough food. Or this is absolute rubbish, by the way. But you know, this is what they think. And this is also what they want to propagate. And I think in their minds, the killing comes first, and the reasons for that come second.
And the killing is very sheathed, isn't it? It's sheathed in the mask of benefit.
Yes.
So it's to your benefit to have fluoride in the water. It's to your benefit to have barium and lithium in the sky sprayed down on you.
Yes, exactly.
And it's your benefit to shoot up your children with 600 vaccinations filled with mercury.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now I think we're in a phase of just indiscriminate, utter and total destruction. That's the truth. And the financial crisis was to move enough people close enough so that they face either starvation or, you know, suicide. They go by themselves. And that was in the US, very, very bad. Also in Europe in many places. And then in Britain, it was even worse because while the MI5 budget was doubled after 2003, what actually happened is that Britain also had austerity now, where they cut the social monies, and you know, disabled people literally killed themselves in despair and in very large numbers. Now that's a genocide, and it's entirely planned. You know, that's the truth. We have now, and I think this is what we're waking up to, through this criminality. We now have an international Nazi class that not just doesn't hold back from killing, they enjoy it, and they think they need much more of it. You know, and will kill absolutely anybody with whatever means at their disposal. So there are many people talking about, I mean, all these topics, you know, you have plastics leaking into food, so from packaging, causing cancer and all sorts of stuff. Then you have, the spraying in the air and so on. You've got the radiation damage to our bodies causing cancer as quickly as possible, and many, 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 many other things, And then on top of that, you've got the targeting. So what we're looking at is a total all-out mutilation and kill program. And for them, the only question is how much fun and how much money can they get out of the process. That's it.
Right.
And that's why we see a lot of victims, especially female victims. I've never met a female victim, and also never met really many male victims who said that they were never assaulted sexually during their targeting. I just haven't come across anybody. Everybody gets raped, gets assaulted, gets humiliated and mutilated. And behind that, I think, is a very big and very sick porn industry,
Must be. Yeah, because it's connected to the surveillance industry. And what that really is doing is they are sticking bugs in people's homes, watching people in their most private moments. What are they doing with all that video footage?
Yes, exactly.
Why does it need to be taken?
Yeah, and I think
dark web streaming maybe, or something. I do feel like it's almost like a very sick and twisted. The targeting is like this sick and twisted version of the Truman Show meets Hunger Games meets Survivor. They do gain some kind of sick pleasure out of watching this happen, and at the same time, like you say, making money off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you know, Ahmad, we talked recently to Midge Mattis, and she's doing such a great job kind of uncovering the whole system of private companies that are working in conjunction with the big security and intelligence agencies in order to run these targeting programs on people. Because there's, implant companies that are creating RFID chips, for instance. Those companies are involved. Satellite companies are involved. So many.
Yeah.
So there's always a private component, and that sort of falls into this whole military-industrial complex, the ways in which they're so wedded together.
It's that circular profit model where they create disasters and problems, and then they come in. It's that, the Hegelian dialectic where they will create a problem or a thesis, an antithesis, and then a synthesis, and then they come in, they offer up the solution after they have waged as much madness and mayhem as they can and have made a lot of money off of it. They come in and try to be the good guy. I even see that in the targeting community. There's just so much like managed targeting narrative. There's all kinds of deception and people in place who are saying they're one thing when in reality they're not. All kinds of ex-intelligence, and it's just, they have a formula and they don't veer away from it because it works. They keep doing it over and over, and it keeps succeeding. Like Nuremberg, the whole COINTELPRO and MK Ultra, Nuremberg, it seems like there may be this kind of invisible hand moving toward that, trying to manage it. But of course, they're going to manage the information. They don't want people to know the real hardcore truth of the horror that they've created.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And all this is actually peeling back, the layers of horror. And it's really exactly that. It's horrifying, and a lot of people, you get to a stage where you just freeze. There's so much sick stuff that you get paralyzed, and at some point I just thought, now I understand why the heads of Intel have to be psychopaths, because normal people just can't hold this in their heads, they really can't. But on the upside, everything that we said has also a huge upside. Number one is that certainly for the last few decades, this has already been going on in full swing. And there have been other things that have been going on sometimes for centuries and were hidden, and now they're hidden no more. And for every target, there are thousands of hidden targets, and also for every target, I would say there are also thousands of children who are stored away somewhere, and they are being treated even worse. They have even fewer rights than us, and they are literally just shredded in the most inhumane and incredibly sadistic, psychopathic fashion. And what I'm saying is that what they actually have done with the targeting is that they have mobilized a huge professional class. They are now attacking lawyers, doctors, everybody, and as long as these people can just, wisen up quickly enough and unite forces, this can turn into a massive force to be reckoned with. because we have absolutely every tool that society has to offer, and then working towards a goal with utter desperation, you know, for sheer survival. And I think that's the power we need to really break open the big secrets, and find the children. It really is, as dramatic as that sounds, we're now down to let's find the children, you know. Actually, if we turn it all around, everything that they do leads us to the children, because they're integral to this. You know, the child sacrifice is integral. So, for example, there are so many, we mentioned, you know, corrupt lawyers, corrupt judges, psychiatrists, police officers who are involved in targeting. And what we will also discover is that all of them have financial ties, because no one in of that sort of disposition does anything without being paid. And then also they are all tied together by sometimes extremely sick sexual practices. They have been selected specifically because they have them.
Right.
And, you know, and I think this is what we'll discover. And there will be many, many tentacles. And therefore, every target, even if he or she doesn't know it, has a direct link to some really dark financial shenanigans, and also has some direct, actual, fantastic leads for investigators to get their teeth into that lead us to the missing children, you know. And that's why I'm thinking, you know, it is actually a gold mine for any last true detectives, and also even private and hobby detectives. This is a fantastic time to be actually alive, because you are helping to solve the biggest crime of not just the century, the millennium, you know. And that's why, exactly why I think that we should also keep an eye on the financial realm and understand what's going on. Because as soon as you have seen the big picture once, I mean, of course, I'll present my big picture, and I invite everybody to disagree with it and critique it and present their own big picture. Because the issue is we're dealing with complex human systems, and everybody is in a sort of valley. And then you try to climb to a mountain, and then you try to tell other people what the landscape looks like from your mountain. But somebody in another valley, on another hill, might have a totally different view, you know. And we need to put all these together.
I just wanted to make a couple comments. When you talked about the missing children, Katherine, are you talking about this whole landscape of pedophilia that's just being unearthed right now, and being explored, and, you know, being gone after? I mean, people are actually going after this now very seriously, you know, with Pizzagate and Pedogate, and, you know, a lot of citizen journalists trying to explore what's been happening. And finally, we're beginning to see some action, even in our intel agencies. But, you know, there's a whole story, an underground story as well, of how people in the intelligence agencies have been involved in these deadly crimes of pedosadism and pedophilia, and also, you know, child trafficking, the use of children in satanic ritual abuse, the use of children for satanic sacrifices and things like that. You know, the kind of things that Ronald Berner, the Dutch banker whistleblower, has been talking about recently. And some other, you know, and some other people who've come out of that world, the whole Satanist world, as whistleblowers. You know, I think of Swali, and I think of this other woman, I think she's anonymous, who was posted in one of Ben Fulford's articles recently. There was a little video, I don't know if you saw it. I think it's his latest, this last week. So she talks about the children who are missing actually being killed, you know, that these kids have been homicided. They've been used in these ritual sacrifices, and they've been homicided. So in a sense, when we talk about this subject, is it inevitable that we're going to run up against this whole specter of Satanism?
Yes, and more, and some, I think, because I think the missing children, number one, is this huge class of children who are being kidnapped and disappeared in our society. But I think there's also a very, very large contingent, which so systems analysis tells me that they have to be there, but I haven't found them. I don't know where they are, and I suspect they're in the underground bunkers, in underground cities. I think there's a very large group of people who have been farmed, who have been literally bred underground, you know, and had horrific experiments done to them.
I think that's what she mentioned, this woman who talks on this video about her experiences, that there are children who are bred for this purpose.
Yes, and they are bred for human sacrifice. They are bred for all sorts of eugenics experiments. They are bred for genetic experiments, and they're also bred to create a huge underground army that's not accounted, that no one knows about. I expect all these things. And as I said, I mean, I'm just a systems analyst, so I'm just looking at what a human system would do, and I expect these to be actually very, very significant, very, very big. And when I heard that there are, huge underground cities everywhere around the world, I'm not surprised. That's what I would expect, And I think they're all there. And so far, I have not seen, there were some very, very curious cases. For example, there was the case of, this guy called Fritzl in Austria who had, a woman in the cellar, and then other people who had, women in the cellar and so on.
Even here in the US, I think a few cases.
Exactly. And that's almost like a little experiment, I mean, when you look at the actual DIY skills of these guys, I'm thinking, well, I can't quite believe that the guy just did that on the weekend without his wife noticing. I think that was put together by some, black ops people. It's a proper big, a reinforced thing. And then this guy actually secretly worked for the CIA or, whatnot, the local intelligence agency, and ran experiments on this person down there, as kind of like a mini lab. And I more and more I think about these horrific crimes, and I look at the detail and expertise that was required to pull it off, and I think that smells like a team, So where's the team? Why have we not heard about it?
It always smells of complicity. So somebody knows, people who visit the house will know or become aware of, and then are pulled into the circle of complicity.
Exactly, but more than that, also the sophistication of the technology, to build these bunkers and whatnot. So, I think there's all that sort of stuff going on. And whatever, if you have a case like that, and you think, hang on, I think that's a lab experiment, you very quickly think, hang on, if you have a huge, multi-trillion black budget, what sort of experiments like that would you do, if you were sick in the head? And again, the financial realm gives us an indication of what sort of order of magnitude to look for, And so some people might have heard about the 9 trillion that went missing, and that was just announced briefly before 9/11. And so, apparently the accounting department was just in the, that was dealing with the missing 9 trillion, was just in the bit of the Pentagon that got hit by what looks like a missile, not a plane.
Oh, right.
And that got destroyed. But that's just 9 trillion. And there were other methods by which people tried to look for the black budget. And actually a very, very important name is Katherine Horton, and she chanced on the black budget. She wasn't looking for it. She just wanted to find out why money didn't reach certain parts of the country, or maybe the part of the country she was in charge of. And then she built a software that was keeping track of money flows, as I understand. And then she discovered that there was in the Department of Housing, that was her department, because I think she was the Assistant Secretary for Housing under George W. Bush. And in the Department of Housing, there seemed to be a massive black hole that seemed to just suck away, monies of the order of magnitude that you can't believe. And that was totally out of proportion. And then it's like going up to a sinkhole, and then you realize it's a big black hole. You're staring down something big and nasty. And that's what happened to her, and I think she was targeted very heavily. She survived an assassination attempt, as she said, Her business was destroyed, and very expensive litigation she had to go through. So that is how big it was what she discovered. So she discovered this big black hole. And then after that, I think she looked back, and the last number I heard from her, I hope I remember it correctly, she said that since the 90s, about 43 trillion went missing or something like that. So roughly that order of magnitude, 40 trillion. That's a horrifically large number. And what's very, very important to understand, and she made this point, and I think it's brilliant, because as soon as she said that, it suddenly just clicked in my head. She said, what you have to realize is that when you have this sort of money, you can operate a parallel society and just live off the interest, So in a sense, as soon as 43 trillion was stolen from the visible, the public, the public purse, and it went black, it means that it can stay black henceforth, because with the rate of return that you can typically get, you can live off that forever after. So that point means that she calls it the black tapeworm, or she calls it the tapeworm at the heart of our economy, and this tapeworm is sucking in resources and money from the world we see around us and just disappears it off somewhere. And that's the point when the tapeworm detaches and becomes an autonomous creature by itself,
And if you couple that with what's really going on in the world of secrecy as we know it, with the numbers of secret agencies advancing rapidly year after year, I understand there's about more than 1,800 currently government agencies that are secret, and if you add to that the numbers of contractors working with these secret agencies, and then you add in all the numbers of people who are given these top secret clearances, 5 million, about 5 million, I think, with top secret clearances, and about 1 million with above top secret clearances. So you have this vast and growing population that's sitting around waiting to eat all this black money that we never hear about.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And what it actually is, it's also because they have access to the technology, the spying technology, and this is a spying infrastructure, and it's a spying civilization. It's a parallel society where they are huge insiders. They've got access to all the surveillance equipment, to the hacking tools. They can hack themselves and log themselves into any of our computers, I would guess. Survey any of our homes. I think they can dial into the surveillance bugs we have in our homes at will. Like you could, in the olden days, you could just pull out the selector and get somebody's emails. I think now you can get the surveillance video of their, in their home, and also you can dial into the chips in and on their heads and elsewhere in their body. So that's what we're talking about. This is a parallel civilization with incredible power and incredible ruthlessness,
and the ability to protect its doing.
Exactly.
Through this kind of chipping and control system.
Exactly. And that is, I would say, the biggest problem humanity has faced ever, because we have now de facto a two-tier society. We really do. And we notice it when we go up to our stalkers here, and it's just some little absolutely, good for nothing little critter who's then driving a fancy car and is doing absolute nonsense and destroying your life, Now that's the parallel society. So there's this system inversion whereby the absolute scum of society has been elevated by these uber powerful surveillance people above any sort of normal society. And then they're doing with abundance the sort of nonsensical stuff that they like to engage in. But the problem is, and this is where it now becomes very, very dangerous, because it is like a society totally going out of kilter. It can go well for some time, but in the end, what happens is that resources, finite resources, are used up, and sometimes resources, or rather, capital or investment potential, is being destroyed and being replaced by total dross. So I'll give you an example. There's this term human resource, and I think it's the biggest misnomer ever. It's probably some psychopaths who came up with this, but humans are not a resource. Humans, they look like a resource, but they're actually more like capital. They're more like an investment. Okay, and it's a huge difference. Actually, it's a huge difference, because when you have a resource, you expect some sort of linear stuff that, a mine is a resource. You expect to just, put in a certain amount of work, and then you get a certain amount of return, and you dig stuff out of the ground, and then you use it up at a fairly linear, predictable way. When you're talking about investment or capital has the potential to grow non-linearly. That's why they love it. You can make money grow non-linearly, certainly in our world with the, financial shenanigans, but because it's much more, it's faster flowing and so on and so on. This is why you can't really have any sort of agricultural production line with 8% rate of return, year in, year out. But with money, you can do that sort of stuff, if you're clever. And humans are actually not a resource. They are like capital. They can have a huge rate of return if you invest correctly in them, you know. And that is, I think, goes to the heart of everything. Because humans have a certain way, it goes to the heart of absolutely everything, actually, because it also ties in with NI, natural intelligence versus AI, artificial intelligence, and so on. And people, I think, reach the conclusion that humans need to be gotten rid of because they are not productive enough. You know, their rate of return is not as good as you could have it with robots or another sort of resource. And because you think about humans as a resource, but as soon as you start thinking about humans as capital, as an investment, you immediately know what's wrong. You know, you don't say, oh, well, my rate of return is not good enough, therefore the money is bad. You just say, no, it's invested in a wrong way. You have to invest it differently. And that's exactly true with humans. And it's true with every single human. So with the lifetime.
I think you've hit upon something very, very valuable, very huge, because there is a difference between thinking of a human as like a useless eater or a resource to be managed, and then a difference between seeing that particular person as an opportunity.
Yes.
And that's going to continue to grow.
Exactly, the growth, that goes to the heart of it, because and this sort of view that we have now arises out of the fact that the cartel holders grew out of the factory owners and also the bankers, but mostly, you know, also the bankers were focused on the factories and so on of the Industrial Revolution. And there, when you have a factory production line and you have mines and that sort of stuff, you think about resources, and money is different. And then the workers who came, you wanted, you know, the children and the really low wage people to just churn out and have a certain resource, and you operated them like robots. And that's why, you know, people think, oh, a factory production line and humans are the same sort of entity, you know. They really think of us like a factory production line. You know, we get born, we then do certain things, and then we go to school, and then we go have a job, and then we die, you know. And they have a very sort of, you know, very deterministic, you know, frankly, shallow and stupid, simple approach. But that's wrong. And I think what's missing in this view, and it goes to the heart of finance, actually, because the same people who do that have a totally different view about investment. And they absolutely glorify capital and investment. And they do that because it appears to them, especially with the financial mechanisms that we have now, and especially to the very big guys who literally print money out of thin air, it just, you know, it appears like, oh, well, that's like such an abundance, you know, it just keeps giving. So money just keeps giving. And the key is to realize that humans are the same. And therefore, human systems can be the same as well, but not with the models we have now. If you think that the human being has to work like a production line, like a factory, very deterministic, and you try to control this human, you will not have this extra sort of growth factor, because you will literally kill it yourself when you do that. It actually took me a very, very long time to realize that, because I was brought up with this sort of view. You know, at school, you put through a production line, even at university. Then I became a fellow, and I was taught, oh, you know, I was told, oh, you're free and you can do whatever you like. But nevertheless, in the very first job I had, I was still operated like on a production line. And then I left particle physics and I began to research my own stuff. And that's when suddenly the world opened up. And I just felt like, at first I felt like I compared it to going up to a tall building, standing on its edge, turning such that you face, you know, the abyss with your back, and just letting yourself drop, you know. And then you think, oh, I'm going to figure out how to fly whilst I'm falling. You know, that's what it feels like to an academic when you leave the field where you invested years and years, and then you think, oh, I'm just going to make it up, you know, on the fly. But as soon as
the whole system, to me, their entire system is about creating work environments where people do not question authority ever. It's built into the master-slave model is built into all the systems and structures that they create. But they're trying to take it to another level to replace humans with robots and AI and whatever else, because then they can guarantee that there will never be human beings who question authority or resist. They want to take that final element out of the equation, I think.
Absolutely, they certainly do. They certainly do. I've seen that now, and it's not just so misguided. It just leads to you just create a glass ceiling for yourself, because the extra hyperdrive that you're missing comes out of actually non-stop thinking of new versions of this, and that's why AI can't do that, because AI it's as silly as it sounds, but whatever you do, you in a sense get out what you put in. AI is at the heart of it still mathematics, and with maths you just get out what you put in. That's the thing. It's there's some self-learning elements, yes, but the way it's self-learning, you put it in. What it's focusing on, you put it in. There is not this random element, actually, that is true creativity. And that's one thing. And then the other thing is also that humans have a way to, humans are like little AI, they are NI, but they also interface with other NI machines in a very natural way. And through that, you get network effects and amplification effects. Mm-hmm. And I seriously doubt that, they are now talking about, the Internet of Things, and, one day they'll have, AI talking to AI and trying to in the same way that humans do. And the one thing I can predict is that will be the biggest headache ever. It will be the biggest ever shot in the foot, because you are shortcutting evolution. And when you do that, the number of problems you face go up non-linearly. They go up faster than the number of solutions you can generate. Because when you're looking for solutions, you have to kind of sit down and look for them, And at the end of the day, there will always be some sort of human input to these, and that will not go up as fast as AI, interfacing with AI. So, that I can already see the crash coming, and it will be very bad for the people at the top, because they don't realize, but a self-learning algorithm, you never know ahead of time what it's going to learn,
There's another part of AI, though, and that has to do actually with targeting and what's being done to target. It's the kind of the neural mapping that's being done, right, of targets' brains.
Yeah.
It's all about neurotech, and this is about taking that information from these neural mapping learning algorithms that they have let loose, and putting that in through their supercomputer into their AI construct. Right. Mm-hmm. So what is the implication there? That they really believe that they can map human brains, the functioning of human brains, and the functioning of all human brains, and kind of do a cumulative construct of that, and then feed that into the AI monster, who then can function as the singularity, the one singular, multi-human brain.
Replacement source. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say that I have experienced a sincere attempt to move me from natural intelligence to artificial intelligence. So like that fusion of man and machine, the transhumanism and all that, I've had firsthand experience of it, and it is stunning. Like the capability of what they have now is pretty stunning, the ability to manipulate all kinds of things. So, they are trying to move toward that, and I see us as probably the biggest problems because of our innate resistance to what they're doing. There's no doubt that it's been in place, at least from my experience, for quite a while.
Absolutely, but the one question I have, when I see all that, because they have been doing this for a very, very long time, okay? And then my question is, if that's so amazing, why is everything so shit? I mean, why? Why am I not? Why is it not when the CIA, but that truly has access to this tech, when it goes into a country, why do people not say, oh, wow, here come the boy geniuses? Like, where are they?
Because they're not, boy genius.
They're not. They're absolutely not. And you know what? I kind of, I've seen it all before. That's what I keep thinking. I mean, that's the one thing that being an academic really gives you, because you've seen it before. I was like, you know, when I met Dr. Robert Duncan, who was also smart, I was like, oh man, for you, I've got like 200 of people like you, and I've already met them already, you know. And it's just, when you go to academia, you know, that's the best advice I ever got going to Oxford. One guy said to me, remember this one thing, never be too impressed. And that goes right to the heart of the matter. Because then, you know, you get into Oxford and you are surrounded by people who are they all came top of their year. Because if you didn't, you're not getting in. So, you know, they're all pretty clever. And then, of course, they're all so super clever, like especially the guys, they're like so clever, like you can't believe. And then you get to your finals and you think, hang on, what happened to all those super clever guys? Why did they get like 2 2s and 2 1s? And, you know, very few got firsts. Like, why are they all? You know? Okay. And then you go one step up because you enter the PhD program, and there's again a selection filter, because then, you know, you're surrounded by people who really got firsts, and, you know, then you get in and you get into research, and that's really, you are, especially in particle physics, where you have these huge communities of 300 or now 3,000, plus now 3,000 physicists all working together. You have really an overview. So when you're at CERN, you know, for a few months, every month you see pretty much like the big names just, you know, washing through CERN. And it's a huge privilege, because other science fields do not work like that. And then you really get a gauge for what is the creme de la creme, you know, because they will be there at seminars, at colloquia, they'll be asking questions, they'll be writing angry emails about your paper, because all of the physicists sign with their names. Every paper that gets, you know, released by Atlas and CMS, all, you know, put their name to it, so everybody reads it, or most people read it, you know. And then when you get suddenly 2,000 angry physicists saying, you know, why didn't you do it my way? That's when the nightmare starts. You really meet the clever ones. And then you kind of also meet Nobel Prize winners, and you think, okay, so, you know, that maps it out. And okay. And there are some absolutely amazingly clever people, but you get the feel for how many really clever people there are in such a population like that, that's really pushing itself to the absolute top. Okay. And then, you know, after your PhD, you become a postdoc, and I became a research fellow, and I went back to, you know, St. John's College. And there I was surrounded by professors who have, you know, gone through so many like selection processes. They've stayed professors for years, absolutely all amazing, and so on. And then, you know, things start happening in college, and then you think, if we're all that freaking clever, why is this so crap? You know, like, why is nonsense still happening? You know, and at some point, when somebody really, we had, and that's when I really hit the roof. We had admissions, which at Oxford is a hugely stressful time, because you have to pick the best of the best and not be biased and so on. And somebody over lunch gave me the spiel about how, yes, and we're Oxford, and, you know, I think they might even have a guest there. So it was a total faux pas, because when guests are there, we all have to portray this image of, yes, oh, we're all brilliant, you know. And then this professor was waxing lyrical about how, yes, we just, you know, admit the best of the best, and all these fellowships, they're even more selective and so on. And I just looked at him and I said, you know, so-and-so, it's like, if we just admit geniuses, where are they all? You know, and the entire room went silent, you know. But literally, if they're so flaming brilliant, where are they all? With literally, and you have to keep asking this. If this AI is so amazing, where are its results? I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing, and you know what? These big guys who are also own the AI, they own these big mega corporations. Have you ever worked in one of these mega corporations? It's like the biggest rectal ache that you can possibly imagine. People hate it, you know? Totally. People are never happy in these big corporations. And why? I mean, the owner.
That's true. And it's because there's, you know, in every single corporation, in every single large corporation, there is a philosophy of, you know, mini corporate totalitarianism that's running on the ground. Right?
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point. I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And that's what they want to work towards, but it is like it is a form of communism, and, you know, this dictatorship sort of setup. But communism was a total failure, And, people try to revive it and they say, oh, yes, but communism and socialism wasn't done properly. Maybe Cuba, that's the model. And you think, okay, Cuba, you move there, and stay there. Please throw away your passport, and stay there. And it's just, well, that, and what it really boils down to is a big fat misunderstanding that people are just, and just misconception that people are too proud or too psychopathic to admit actually exists. And this goes to the heart of it, I think. Because what it actually is that it doesn't work like that. We're missing a trick here, And that's exactly what I thought when I was analyzing human systems. I kept thinking, well, supposedly in academia, we're all super clever. Why is everything so absolutely atrocious, Why is everything so inefficient? And then you go to, to the court system and, oh gosh, these judges are so learned and you've got these learned judges. And then you think, why are they talking all tosh? What's all the gibberish? And why do they not, you work really hard to understand what you're saying. And then you realize it so wasn't worth your time because it was nonsense. And you think, how can this be? And the same with companies and the same with banks, and especially banks, because you think they are so obsessed with making money. Why are they so bad at it? They really have to print it out of thin air, because actually, counter to everything that is portrayed in the media, banks these days are appallingly poor at spotting good business plans. They are atrocious, absolutely. And there are many examples of that. I remember one talk by, it was John Timpson. So he owns, I think now he's got a monopoly position pretty much, but he owns the key cutters and shoemakers, or now it's key cutting, and this sort of stuff, business. And I think it's mending shoes. So, healing shoes and cutting keys. And I remember that there was a competitor, and he, went down to London and he wanted to buy it from the people who took it over, because I think it went into maybe bankruptcy or something. And then, UBS bought it, I think. So he went down to London and he wanted to buy it from UBS. And he thought he'd really calculated, the business and had a good proposal, a really good, price for it. And he went there, and first of all, he was met by, they made him wait a very long time. And then he was met by, two people who were in their early 20s. And they just told him, well, thank you very much for your offer, thank you. But that thing isn't for sale because we want to run it, it will be run professionally. Like people who run it professionally. And there you've got the guy who actually, runs that sort of business as a family business and has done, in 2 or 3 generations. He's like, all right. So he went outside, and he said he was there with his partner, and they sat down and had a coffee, and he thought to himself, oh, good God, they'll run it professionally. There will be a hell of a competition. So now we really have to think about what we're doing. And what happened? 2 or 3 years later, this entire thing went bankrupt, and he bought it for £1. The entire chain system.
Oh, wow.
So literally, he bought it for £1. And then he said it was better because he also bought all the debts and all the losses that or rather the losses that the company had. So he could deduct it off against his profits. He made even more money. And then he pulled it up. So how come this big bank, UBS, that had such a huge thing, made such a pig's ear out of it? And it's because of the inefficiencies, People think about, okay, I'm going to do this. And they think through the process, but they don't think about what are the complexities and what are the inefficiencies that we're going to generate. And sometimes the inefficiencies are growing non-linearly. So, your profits grow like that, but your inefficiencies grow like that. So, eventually your inefficiencies will make you totally bankrupt. So people probably now wonder, what the hell has this got to do with finance and targeting? Well, what it has to do with it is that when you have been brought up running factories like the oligarchs and the cartel holders have, and mines and all this big stuff and shipping enterprises and so on, you start treating humans like that. And then you put them into your factory line production, and you totally miss the point that humans are a different sort of entity, a different sort of tool. So you try to use them as screws, and try to squeeze them into a day job like that, and then just turn, okay? Just keep the stuff rolling. And you forget they are not screws. They are never the same shape. They keep morphing. They keep, it's like having a little thing that's like in these sci-fi films, something that levitates in your palm and just keeps changing shape and color and just grows tentacles and then puffs, away and then comes back. That's humans, okay? So it's an ever-changing thing with its own dynamism. If you try to squeeze that into a factory production line as a screw, you will have problems. You will have an attrition rate, first of all, of this entity, and second of all, of your production line. And that's exactly what we do. And then on top of that come the actual organizational structure, that has natural inefficiencies, the pyramid, and so on. Okay, so this is why it doesn't work. And when I realized that, I thought, oh, hang on, how best, and I wanted to make a presentation and communicate with people who are, in charge of human resources. And I thought, how best to explain it to them? And the best way I could say is that this is not human resources, this is human capital. So you have to think about how you invest it, and if the investment isn't good, take the human out and try it differently, keep changing it. But anyway, so that's the overall structure. And what it all comes down to, and I think Ahmad is totally right, that targeting is the total ultimate, taking it to the absolute limit, that you want to control humans totally. You want to put chips into their heads. You want to monitor exactly everything what they're doing. You want to plan ahead for what they're thinking, what they're going to decide. Everything, monitor everything. They're breathing, they decide when they're going to get a heart attack and can be disposed of, and this sort of stuff. So it is like factory production. It's a factory sensory system. That's what it is, because big production lines like at Siemens has these plant control centers, and I bet my guts, because I've heard from Dr. Reinhard Munzert that Siemens is involved in targeting. I bet
Siemens was involved in the creation of chips. It was one of the companies.
Exactly, and the reason why that has to be that way is because they put these chips, these sensory chips, everywhere into their factory production lines to monitor the quality of that. So eventually they will start thinking, oh yes, let's put chips into our factory workers to monitor quality. It's just like, oh my God, guys, you just haven't understood something, and that's exactly what you're up against. So that's, that's
that's a huge distinction in philosophy between seeing humans as, created humans with infinite potential, whose space needs to be honored in order that they can, live and grow, and to enrich that space and nurture that space. And then the philosophy, which is the top-down eugenicist philosophy, of seeing humans as just little knobs and cogs of the wheel here.
Exactly. And the really big thing that's so wrong is that what you have to do with these little things that are these wondrous little creatures is, you first of all you can put robots next to your factory production line, but these creatures you have to leave as free as possible, okay? Because they will, and that's what people don't understand. A human being will, if you just leave it, find its absolute optimum by itself. It will actually reach its own peak performance by itself. It will pick the best direction it wants to go through, the right speed. It will literally just be a little engine by itself. And when you let it just team up with others, it will have this amplification effect, and then come network effects and nonlinear effects within networks and ideas flowing and so on, and having a life of their own. And that's really where the true wealth lies. And that's exactly the wealth that is systematically murdered and killed off.
Yes, and I actually wanted to bring up that point that you made earlier, Katherine, about how, there were this large corporation that wanted to run it professionally. That, in a sense, is what we're seeing in spades currently. We're seeing all of the little businesses, the small businesses being, suppressed and repressed out of existence, and now being also targeted out of existence, such as my own little business of running creativity workshops, right?
Yes.
And then you're seeing all of these larger conglomerates rigging the systems so that they can run their businesses and squeeze out, the mom and pop shops, the small farms, the small businesses, the small workshop leaders, and so forth. There's something very skewed about that, but all of that appears to be along the lines of this communistic New World Order,
Yes.
this totalitarianistic system that they're trying to roll out infinitely over and over in every country.
And I think what people don't realize is that, you know, communism as a project was tried because it appeals to them. It appeals to them so very much, and they really thought if they apply communism to these countries, they can squeeze every last bit out of it. So, you know, it was already published, I think, was it Anthony Sutton, who wrote the book about how the Second World War was financed by the Anglo-Saxon banks, which already at the time were headquartered in Switzerland. So this, and Sean Frost, the historian, speaks about how the Swiss had a massive hand in the Second World War. And that's all true. And Sean Frost also talks about how the Swiss had a massive hand in communism, you know. So Mao was educated in Switzerland, which is not a mistake. And
yes, and also those Korean guys, the dictator's sons, who now have gotten into power.
Exactly. And it's portrayed like, oh yes, but you know, the Swiss schools, they're really good. Nonsense. Nonsense. That's here where the cartel was headquartered, you know.
Yeah, let's talk about Switzerland. I'm looking at the time, actually. We're a little beyond the 1 hour mark.
Oh gosh, yes, we're quite a bit beyond the 1 hour mark. We should just truncate it if you have time, you know, maybe in different topics. Because also I realized that we started talking about something that I didn't actually plan to talk about at all. It's
been very interesting though, because you know you kind of talked about the targeting aspect and how it affects finance, or how it's connected to the financial system.
Exactly. I guess it's the targeting aspect, how it feeds into the entire mindset that these people have, which is this old factory organization, and then also the financial architecture that, you know, would support a factory operation or mining operation. Mm-hmm. And that's what they apply to our schools and so on. And now they think, oh, as you know, if we interface our factory workers with the robots, we could really gain some advantage. And it's just like, no, you really won't, you know. And at the same time, just like in communism, because communism was also this very deterministic, machine-like sort of operating of people, what they actually discovered is that communism was, I think, one of the most inefficient big, large-scale economic experiments ever. It utterly devastated the country. It led to huge inefficiencies, huge fraud, and humans froze and didn't do anything, you know. So I was born in the communist system. I was born in communist Romania, and my parents fled communist Romania when I was a child. But we visited, and we have, you know, strong ties, and you know, going back, and we saw how this entire system unfolded and literally unraveled, you know, at the end. And one of the most striking things is that when you were in the communist system, you had a job guaranteed. You know, they found a place for you somewhere in the system, and that's where you stayed put, but you had, you know, your job guaranteed and so on. But people didn't go to work, you know, and they didn't even talk about going to work. They talked about attending work. You know, you went and you attended, like something that just happened to you. You know, you went there, and like concert, and it just went woof, and you just had to sit there. That was very much how humans operated. There was no drive coming out of them, right. You know. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And by the way, as the targeting hit me, that's exactly what happened to me. And the targeting has in no way made me any more creative or efficient or productive. And actually, the amount of money I could have made for the people, whoever the people are who are making money off me, is absolutely nothing, you know, in comparison to what I could have done had they just left me the hell alone by now, you know. And I think that's.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to say, I think that sometimes these systems are set up precisely for the reason to erode society, so they never want it to work. They want to ravage a country and break it down from the ground up. And so, you know, and it's depressing, and so in a sense too, it probably comes from motivations of population and social control and ultimately erosion.
Yes, I think it does. And actually, I mean, exactly what you said, this is the goal is ultimate destruction. And the question is why? what could possibly be a financial motivation in utterly destroying your productive assets, And that goes to the very heart of it. And that leads us to Switzerland and to many, many other things. Now, the question I have to you is, would you like to break it off here, or shall we continue?
Well, I was thinking, actually, if you wanted to talk about Switzerland, shall we go on for another, say, 20 minutes? And that would make it like a 1.5-hour program?
Sure.
Yes. So how Switzerland ties in, okay, so that's we talked about in the beginning, we talked about this big black budget and Katherine Horton Fitz discovering something that's the tapeworm at the heart of the economy. And that's a very, very good thing, a very, very good image of how to think about it, because it sucks, productive assets out of the normal economy. It just disappears into something, and there's this creature, somewhere down there. It's a bit like, so much about this imagery also appears in films, because the Hollywood films are, Hollywood is owned by the cartel, and you realize actually most of the films they make about themselves, because they love themselves so much. And it's just like, it's like an insider group just having insider stuff,
Well, they're pushing certain agendas, right? I mean, that's what Hollywood is doing all the time. Look at the connection with the military, for instance, and the thousands of, military glorifying shows and movies that come out of Hollywood.
Absolutely.
And sci-fi stuff, their vision and sort of that predictive programming model of what they're trying to push over on the populace. Here's what you have to look forward to, this dystopian, nightmaric future.
Exactly. And if we think back about to the talking about sci-fi, to the Star Wars films, I forgot always what the name of that creature is, but it's in this kind of like sand creature. It's just a big open mouth, and it just lives for absolutely centuries or millennia.
Oh, right.
Pardon?
I can't remember the name of it. I know
exactly. That's what I mean. There's just a scene that people are being dropped into it, and it just swallows them, and it's just at the heart of this planet. And it's just this big open mouth that just swallows everything and digests it over several centuries. Well, that is, I think, the very best image we can have for this tapeworm at the heart of our economies. Because, when you go up to the opening, it's this big threatening mouth. And if you ever fall into it, it's just going to crush you, and then it's going to digest all the productive assets, sometimes over centuries, And now the question is, what exactly is the tapeworm at the heart of the economies? And I keep going on about this paper, and Karen Hudis goes on about this paper. She even named her entire TV series after it, because it's so important. It's called The Network of Global Corporate Control, and it was a paper published by ETH Zurich by a group of mathematicians and systems analysts. And ETH Zurich is special because it's one of those few departments that has a systems analysis faculty, actually. Mm-hmm. And these people published a paper where they analyzed the company registries from, I think, 43,000 global companies. And they discovered something huge. They discovered that despite all the antitrust, anti-monopoly laws that exist in all the countries, there is this huge structure, a one single monolithic organism structure, cartel, syndicate thing that they managed to map for the very first time. And that seems to own 40% of all these companies, global companies. And it's huge. And I think in terms of profits, it's like 60% of all the profits, And it's one entity that hangs together. So it's like almost half of all the big global corporations. And then you have to say that there's actually a dark, again, a dark bit. So I think this entity is much, much bigger, even in terms of the registries. But some parts can't be traced quite as simply.
And when you say entity, do you mean a network?
Yes. I mean, even more than that. It looks like one big corporation.
Okay.
It operates like one big corporation because it's connected through the flow of control. And I think, I have to reread the paper, but I think that's the clue, because most antitrust laws go after share ownership, for example. So you can't, you can't just buy up the world like that. But what they didn't look at is interlocking board memberships. And the boards decide what's being done. So when you interlock directorships and you place your same directors on different boards and you have this network of controlled directors, you can control much, much more than you control by just your financial weight. You know, you control the decisions. And again, I say there's this dark number because that's just what they managed to map. And the way they managed to map it is using modern database analysis tools where you can map out very, very complex data very quickly and show the network structure, so how they all interlinked. And what they mapped out is that this huge monolithic structure does seem to hang together. And at the very top, there are very, very few companies, you know. There's just like, it kind of tapers to, you know, maybe 100, then 20, and then I think 5 at the top that control everything. And of course, the top ring is banks, you know, and I think insurance companies. And these banks really, truly do control this. But then their ownership kind of goes dark. And I think that's, you know, they call that thing the super entity. And that's as far as you can see. It's kind of like the mouth of that big creature in the sand. And you can just see the teeth and the rim of its lips. And that's it. That's the banks. And where the stuff goes then is totally dark. It's inside its stomach. So if you really want
to...
Then
they buy up the smaller companies too. They're always in the business of buying up smaller companies, especially when they get competitive because they need control.
Exactly, even more control. So, you know, that is a big, big thing, this paper. I personally think as a systems analyst, this is the, you know, I would say that, but I think this is the most important paper of the beginning of the 21st century, because this entity goes at the heart of absolutely everything, the heart of finance, the heart of financial fraud, the heart of the black budget, the heart of organized crime, the heart of targeting, a lot of disease, genocide, destruction, and wars. It doesn't get bigger than that, I would say. And this thing is, you know, what this is, and people throughout the centuries have been saying that there's a conspiracy, you know, there's some syndicate, there are these guys working together. And for the very first time, it's proven. And we know who they are, most of them, you know. And now you think, okay, that is the public corporations, the people we know about. There are other entities in our government or in our world that have not been mapped like that. Number one is governments. Number two is actually the true ownership of intelligence agencies. And then a really big thing that's missing is organized crime. And I always say organized crime is just like any other business. It has a supply chain, it has employees, it has, you know, boards and decision makers, but it doesn't pay tax. That's the one difference. It doesn't pay tax. And there's no antitrust laws. There's no regulation. So it is like any other business with the weight lifted off. So if you have two equivalent businesses, one is a crime business, the other one is a normal business, the crime business will always make, you know, the difference in tax, more return every year, and then reinvest that and then make more return and more return. So very quickly you realize that when you start off with two equivalent businesses, the crime business is going to grow much faster. And whoever's in crime is going to go get that much richer, therefore more powerful. And therefore, you know, before long, any organized crime is going to outgrow in terms of its power and financial weight any normal business we know. So if you think that governments are big, just think organized crime. So when you think, who owns?
Isn't it the same thing?
Good question.
Isn't it the same thing?
Oh,
it's synonymous.
Yes. So the question is, yeah, who owns this big, big corporation? And the answer is obvious. It must be owned by organized crime, right? Because, you know, they will be buying the shares. They will be infiltrating the directors. So there we go. That's the answer. And that's why it goes black, because these people, you know, rely on privacy and all that. So, and then the question is, okay, who is the biggest organized crime business in the world? And the answer is, again, obvious. It will be the oldest organized crime business. There you go. The oldest one. Because when you start early, you acquire assets and then you grow faster. So that's...
You're talking about the Vatican at this point.
Yes, you must do. You must do. You can't go around the Vatican. And there are also parallel things. For example, the Chinese, you know, they were separate for some time. So they had their own organized crime business grow up. So Asia and Latin America as well, but then Latin America was conquered, so so there you go. Then you have to think who had the biggest assets. If you think about who's the biggest now, you can go back in time and say whoever's biggest now is whoever was biggest 200 years ago or 300 years ago. And then you think, okay, who was, really the biggest 2,000 years ago? Well, it was Rome. Where was it, kind of organized from? Well, or the Roman Empire was controlled from Rome. So, whoever we're looking for as the biggest organized crime empire will be pretty close to Rome, But it will be
there are several of these exploitative kind of systems scattered around the world. I mean, let's not forget the British Empire, right? Which made a profession out of stealing goods from countries around the world, including India and China.
Right.
Exactly, totally right. However, they got into the business after the church, right? The church already, the church was in the business of robbing from other countries,
For centuries prior to that, yes.
But isn't it all connected? I mean, Zionism, Nazism, Jesuits, the Luciferian, isn't it all? It all to me seems to have a satanic and a Luciferian underpinning that goes back to Babylonian times. I mean, I still need to research more of that, but all of it comes from a satanic thrust, I think, regardless of the name we put on it.
Yeah, and I think the reason why it's satanic is because what we call satanic now is at its core psychopathic. It's psychopathic. Like they enjoy killing, they enjoy humiliation, and sadistic psychopathic. So the sadistic psychopaths are the most ruthless of them all, and therefore in an organized crime business, they will rise to the top.
Right.
So organized crime.
It's monarch programming too, I think. I think the MK Ultra, the monarch programming methods go way back to like the Egyptian times, the Book of the Dead. You could see these kinds of trauma-based control tactics. They torture, traumatize their children in order to guarantee absolute loyalty, and they build them into whatever they want.
Yes, exactly. That's so true. That's so true. So these methods are absolutely ancient. Exactly. And
they've done some of that to me, by the way. FYI, they've done some of that to me. So I could trace back more subtle versions of satanic ritual abuse and things like that. And I think that in the targeting, they're using the same methods. The trauma-based and the torture is a dissociating experience because it's trying to dissociate us from our natural day-to-day existence. Yeah.
So I think that's exactly right. The question is now how on earth ties all this together with targeting and finance, and that's it's very simple. When you reach this stage, it's just all finance is run by organized crime, and the objectives and the methods, and that's where MK Ultra comes in, of the top organized criminals who are sadistic psychopaths, that will be coloring your entire architecture. But psychopaths, and we had this wonderful, actual MRI of a real psychopath and what a psychopathic brain looks like. And the entire front seems to have reduced capabilities. So a psychopathic mind is not an enabled mind. It's one with reduced functionality. It has some modules missing. And it's exactly what they are missing, where this hyper, alpha power of humanity comes from, and that's what they are destroying. So ironically, there are several things that they're doing that leads, in terms of systems analysis, you can prove that it leads to a reduction of not just wealth overall, it leads to a reduction of their wealth and their power. It really is. It's a downward slide. And the only reason why it doesn't look like that at first is because the people immediately below them seem to slide faster. So people at the very bottom seem to, it's like when you've got a crashing plane, and then, bits of the airplane already detach and fall down, and you just think, ha, 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 you guys, fell down, ignoring that you're about to hit the ground as well, and that's very much the situation we're in now,
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating, because that whole thing about how everybody who's part of the system, in a sense, is susceptible to being imploded is something that not many people factor in. And And literally, it's these people whom you're talking about who are inside that pyramid and at the top level and layers of that pyramid who appear to have completely ignored that possibility.
Yes, totally. And one of the things that's so ironic, I mean, this is what absolutely gets me, is that, you know, when you first meet the system, you think, oh, your heads of intelligence, you know, who are all psychopaths, they're all so powerful. And these banks are also super powerful and they have these absolutely fantastically profitable businesses. And then when you look at it in terms of systems analysis, you realize actually none of the tops of the heads of the, you know, intelligence agencies have any power whatsoever. Even the higher you get, the less power you have, because suddenly there are other pressures guiding your day to day and forcing your hand. And these businesses are not profitable at all. They appear to generate profit because money keeps being produced. And the lack of profitability is first of all covered up and outdone by the money printing. You know, and this money printing went well for some time, but it's like this, you kind of saturate the system and then you start swimming in it, you know, and when you start swimming in it, that's when its value will just suddenly plummet, you know, and that's the truth. Now, gosh, we have talked about it in really, really big theoretical terms actually today, and you know, we didn't come to actually talk about Switzerland and the real financial mechanisms. But to just summarize it all, what it will come down to is the following. Our entire economy, and yes, more than that, I mean, sometimes large parts of our life are entirely based on organized crime, which is fraud and murder,